Truth is like mercury, fluid, hard to hold, but reflecting everything with a chilling, perfect clarity you cannot ignore. Experience the changing nature of reality in our latest high-tech cinematic thrillers. Hit subscribe now and follow the flow of the truth as it reveals itself.
They didn't say goodbye. They didn't even look back. My mother-in-law just picked up the last box, the one with my husband's old camera and his college sweatshirt, and walked out the front door of the house we had lived in together for 6 years. My father-in-law held the door open for her. Neither of them looked at me standing in the hallway in my socks, holding a trash bag full of my own things like I was the one who didn't belong there, because according to them, I wasn't. My husband Elliot died on a Tuesday in March. He was 34 years old. An aneurysm, the doctor said. Fast. Painless, probably. He was at the gym. He just stopped. By the time I got to the hospital, they were already using past tense. I was 29. We had been married for 4 years. We had a mortgage together, a joint account, a cat named Gerald who slept on Elliot's side of the bed every single night without fail. We had plans. Not big dramatic plans. Regular ones. Weekend trip to Vermont in the fall, maybe a baby in a year or two. Lunch at his parents' place every other Sunday. None of that mattered, it turned out, once he was gone. I found out 3 weeks after the funeral. That's how long it took for his parents to file the paperwork. The house had been in Elliot's name only. We had always meant to add mine. We kept saying we'd get to it. We never got to it. His will, the one he made at 26, before we even met, left everything to his parents. He'd never updated it. Why would he? He was 34. You don't think about dying at 34. His parents knew about the old will, and they moved fast. My sister-in-law, Elliot's younger sister, not mine, she called me the night before the lawyer's letter arrived. She was crying. She said, "They're doing it. I tried to stop them. They won't listen to me." She told me what was coming. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with Gerald in my lap and I read through every document I had, every bank statement, every receipt, looking for something that said I existed in that house, that I belonged there. There wasn't much. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning. I had 30 days to vacate. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, which was unusual. I told her what was happening, and she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Come home." I said I couldn't just come home. I was almost 30 years old. I had a job. I had a life here. She said, "You have 30 days. Come home." I didn't have anywhere else to go. I had a coworker I could have asked, maybe. A friend from college who lived across town in a one-bedroom apartment. But I didn't want to be someone's temporary problem. I didn't want to sleep on an air mattress in someone's living room and pretend I was fine. My mother lived 40 minutes away. She had a spare bedroom. She had Gerald-friendly carpeting. She said she'd make up the bed before I got there. I drove over on a Friday after work with 2 suitcases and the cat carrier. She was standing on the porch when I pulled up. She didn't say anything. She just came down the steps and hugged me in the driveway for a long time while Gerald yowled from the back seat. My mother is 61 years old. She retired 2 years ago from a 25-year career as an office manager. She lives alone in the house where I grew up. My dad moved out when I was 16. My younger brother lives 3 states away. It had just been her and the house for a while, and I think it had been getting quiet in a way she didn't always like, though she'd never say that. She gave me the spare room. She never once made me feel like a burden. That was almost 3 years ago. I need you to understand what those 3 years looked like before I tell you what happened at the end of them. I went to work every day. I'm an accountant. I've been at the same firm for 6 years, and the work is the kind that requires you to focus, which I was grateful for. I'd sit at my desk and make numbers, make sense, for 8 hours, and it would take up enough of my brain that I couldn't also be falling apart. That's what I told myself anyway. But I was still sleeping in my childhood bedroom, still driving past the exit for the neighborhood where Elliot and I had lived. Still getting mail forwarded from an address that wasn't mine anymore. The legal situation was complicated. My attorney, a woman I found through a referral from a friend at work, someone who specialized in estate disputes, told me that I had options, but that I needed to be realistic. Elliot's parents had the will. The house was in his name. The law was, frustratingly, fairly clear on the basic facts. What wasn't clear was everything we had built together that wasn't in his name. The joint bank account had been drained the day after his parents got access to the estate. I hadn't even realized it was possible. My attorney told me that was a problem we could address. The furniture, most of it purchased by both of us, with shared cards for a shared home, had been removed by his parents in those early weeks when I was too grief-stunned to stop them. I had photographs of some of it. I had receipts for some of it. I had 6 years of marriage-adjacent life and very little paper trail. My mother never complained once. Not about the legal bills, which I was paying myself from savings. Not about Gerald leaving fur on her good couch. Not about me coming downstairs at 2 in the morning when I couldn't sleep and sitting in her kitchen with the lights off. A few times I came down and she was already there, sitting with a cup of tea, not reading, not watching anything, just sitting. The first time I said sorry, I didn't know you were up. She said, "Don't be sorry. Sit down." So I sat down. We talked about things we'd never talked about when I was growing up. What it had been like when my dad left. What she'd done in those first months, how she'd kept going. How strange it is to rebuild something after someone you counted on is just gone. Not the same situation, obviously, but the same specific loneliness. The kind that other people can't quite see, because on the outside you still look like a functioning person. She said, "You just keep going forward. There's no other direction." She bought a cat toy for Gerald without me asking. She learned his whole personality within a week. She started calling him by a nickname I hadn't even given him. He started sleeping at the foot of her bed. My attorney's name was Fiona. She was precise, thorough, and deeply unsentimental, which was what I needed. She filed a claim against the estate for the value of the joint contributions I could document, the appliances I'd paid for in full, the renovations we had split that I had receipts for, the down payment funds that had partially come from my own savings account. It wasn't the house. We couldn't get the house. But it was something. The deposition with my in-laws was one of the hardest days of my life. Harder than I expected, and I had expected it to be hard. My father-in-law sat across the conference table and looked at me like I was a stranger he'd never met. My mother-in-law didn't look at me at all. Fiona was calm and methodical. I answered every question. I kept my voice even. I cried in the car afterward for 45 minutes. Then I drove home, and my mother had made dinner, and we ate at the kitchen table, and she asked about my day in a tone that meant she already knew, but was giving me the chance to say as much or as little as I wanted. I said, "It was hard." She said, "I know." That was enough. The settlement took 14 months. It was never going to be dramatic. No courtroom moment, no gavel, no visible justice. Just Fiona calling me on a Wednesday afternoon to say they'd agreed to a figure. $47,000, representing my documented contributions to the estate. It wasn't what I'd put into 6 years of that house. It wasn't what I'd put into 6 years of that marriage. But it was real, and it was mine. And Fiona had fought for every dollar of it. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building, and I didn't cry. I just sat there for a while, thinking about the fact that this was it. This was the ending of that particular chapter. The house was not coming back. Elliot was not coming back. But I had $47,000 and a number I could point to that said, I was here. I existed in that life. Someone agreed. I called my mother. She said, "Good. Now we figure out what's next." What was next took another year to come together, but it did come together. The housing market was difficult. I had been watching it carefully, the way accountants watch things. Spreadsheets, quarterly comparisons, neighborhood breakdowns. I knew what I could afford. I knew what I was looking for. Something small, something mine, with a yard if possible, because Gerald had started sitting at the window with the specific yearning of an indoor cat who had begun to want more. I found a house, a small one, 2 bedrooms, on a street that had good trees, and I bought it. By myself. My name on the deed. Mine. I gave my mother 30 days' notice, which she found both thoughtful and ridiculous. She said, "You don't have to give me notice, I'm your mother." I said, "You took me in for almost 3 years. You get the courtesy of a month." She helped me pack. We drove over to the new house with her truck, loaded with my boxes, and Gerald yowling in the back seat again, and she helped me carry everything in. And we set up the bed first because she said that was the right way to do a move. You do the bedroom first so you can sleep there the first night, and it feels like yours. She was right. It felt like mine. Gerald found the sunniest spot in the living room within 10 minutes and sat down in it like he had always lived there. We ordered pizza and ate it on the floor because I didn't have a table yet, and my mother told me about the apartment she'd rented right after my dad left. Tiny, ugly, hers, and how she'd eaten takeout on the floor of that place too, and how that had felt, actually, more like home than the house ever had by the end. I understood that now. I was 32 years old. I was sitting on the floor of my own house. I had a cat, a settlement, a job, and a mother who had given me nearly 3 years of her home without once making me feel like a guest. None of it looked like anything I had planned. It was mine anyway. I'm telling you all of this because of what happened 4 months after I moved in. It was a Saturday morning in November. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, still in the oversized sweatshirt I'd slept in. Gerald was in his window spot. It was quiet and gray outside, and I was thinking about whether I wanted to go to the farmer's market or just stay in and read, which is the kind of decision I'd learned to appreciate. Small, inconsequential, entirely my own. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My mother usually texted first. My one close neighbor, a retired nurse who had introduced herself on the day I moved in and brought me a plant, always came around the back. I looked through the front window first. There was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize, and then I saw who was standing on my porch. My mother-in-law. She was alone. She was standing very straight, the way she always stood, in a coat I recognized from years of Sunday dinners. She had a bag in one hand. She was looking at the door and not at the window, so she didn't see seeing her. My first instinct was to not answer. My second instinct was the same. But I'm not the person I was 3 years ago, standing in that hallway in my socks, holding a trash bag of my own things. I'd learned a few things about what I was capable of. Since then. I opened the door. She looked at me for a moment without speaking. She looked different. Smaller, somehow, though she hadn't changed in any physical way I could identify. She said, "I wasn't sure you'd answer." I said, "I almost didn't." She asked if she could come in. I said no, not because I was trying to be cruel. I want to be clear about that. I said no because I had spent 2 years making a space that was safe and mine, and I wasn't going to let the first person who'd ever made me feel evicted from my own life walk into it without being ready for that. She stayed on the porch. I kept the door half open between us. She had come, she said, because my father-in-law had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's 6 months ago. She said this flatly, without apparent expectation that I would respond with sympathy, which I expected. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She was providing context. She said that the months since his diagnosis had made her think about things differently, about what they had done, about what she would want to be true of herself, of how she had behaved when she looked back on it. She said, "We treated you like someone Elliot had picked up along the way. Like you weren't actually part of the family, and that was wrong. And after he died, we acted like the only way to grieve him was to erase you, and that was also wrong." I stood there with the door half open and Gerald somewhere behind me in the hallway, probably watching. She reached into the bag she was carrying and took out a framed photograph. It was a picture from our wedding, a specific one, from the reception, not a posed shot, just one the photographer had caught by accident. Elliot and I were laughing about something. I couldn't remember what, and we were looking at each other and not at the camera. I didn't have any prints of the wedding photos. Everything had been on a shared cloud account that I'd lost access to when the estate was sorted. She held it out to me. Didn't take it right away. I just looked at it. Then I took it. She didn't apologize again. She didn't ask me to say anything in return. She said she had a few other photographs if I wanted them, from when Elliot and I had been at their house over the years, holidays and things. She said she understood if I didn't. She left her number on a piece of paper from her coat pocket, set it on the porch railing, and said she hoped Gerald was well. She had always liked the cat, she added, which is such an Elliot thing to have, a cat with that much personality. Then she left. I stood in my doorway for a while after her car pulled out. The street was quiet. Gerald had come to sit directly on my feet, which was a thing he did whenever he sensed that standing still was required. I looked at the photograph. Elliot was laughing. I was laughing. We looked like people who thought they had time. I put the photograph on the mantel in my living room. I called my mother. She listened to everything, and then she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "What do you want to do about the photos?" I said I didn't know yet. She said, "That's okay, you don't have to know today." I texted the number from the piece of paper 2 weeks later. I said I would like the other photographs if the offer was still open. My mother-in-law responded within 10 minutes. She said yes, absolutely, whenever was convenient for me. I don't know what any of this becomes. I don't know if there's a relationship to rebuild, or whether there's too much scar tissue for that, or whether the right thing is just to collect what few photographs remain and let the rest go. I'm 32, not 60. I don't have to have it figured out today. What I know is this: I have a house. It's small and it has good trees out front, and a cat who has claimed the sunniest spot in the living room. I have a job I'm good at. I have a mother who spent 3 years handing me her home and her kitchen and her quiet company in the middle of the night without once asking for anything in return, and I have no idea how to repay that except to show up for her the way she showed up for me, for as long as I can. I have a photograph on my mantle of a man I loved, laughing, not looking at the camera. That's not the life I planned. But I built it out of the pieces I had, and I built it with my own hands, and it is completely, entirely, irreversibly mine. And I thought, that's enough. That's more than enough. That's actually everything.